Herkese merhaba. Geldiğiniz için tekrar teşekkür ederiz. Uzun bir gün tabii. Burada hep beraberiz ve çok keyifli bir serüvenin parçasıyız. Aslında serüvenin 14 sene önce çok daha keyifli bir şekilde 14 senedir devam ettiğini görüyoruz ama belki Bay 7'sini İzmir'de yakalayabilir miyiz diye bakıyoruz. Ve buradaki en önemli konuklarımız tabii elbette Yunanistan'dan gelen konuklarımız. Şu anda da Vassilis Colonas bize bir sunum yapacak. Sözü ona bırakıyorum.
Introduce myself. What I'm doing, you mean? Okay. I don't need to say something about me. No. Thank you, İlker, for the introduction and for the invitation, of course. You can hear me well? Yes, I'm very happy to be again in İzmir. I was here last year in this same week of architecture, organized by the MİMARLIK. But it was not my first visit in İzmir. My first visit was in 1995, and I'm very lucky that two of my colleagues who were there to help me in that period are still present, Itziku Yulu and Arif Sertek, and I'm very grateful to them because we are always collaborating between our cities and our universities. So it's time that the young generation start to collaborate in the framework of architects' chambers, not only universities and friendships. Today I will speak about my city, Thessaloniki. It is my PhD thesis. It was almost 40 years ago I supported this thesis. And it's about a neighborhood in the outskirts of Thessaloniki after the demolition of the fortification. So if we can put the lights a little bit less lights, and we'll start. During the last quarter, it's enough. I think you can see better now. During the last quarter of the 19th century, Thessaloniki, an important commercial port in the eastern Mediterranean and the largest urban center in the region west of Constantinople, was in an especially privileged position to exploit the results of the reforms being introduced across the Ottoman Empire, the Tanzimat, as we know. The main thrust of these reforms was to grant equal rights to all the inhabitants of the empire, regardless of faith or ethnic origin, and more specifically to grant the right to dispose of and develop immovable property as they wished within the borders of their state. Furthermore, the introduction of new technology and expertise on the road and the enactment of new building regulations were creating propitious conditions for a whole series of interventions designed to modernize the functioning of the city and to establish a range of new building types which would meet new functional and housing needs. In Thessaloniki, these interventions took the form principally of the demolition of a large section of the city walls, this is the demolition and the redesign of the seafront, the opening up of new road arteries and widening of existing roads, the construction of a rail network at stations, and of a new port. This is another demolition of the western part of the eastern part of the city, and the creation of a new boulevard. And this is the new board. And all these details, the shares of the company of the board, and the construction details found in the presidential Ottoman archives in Istanbul. And the creation of infrastructures as well within the city, and urban amenities, and finally, as you can see here, the expansion of an opportunity to redesign the urban fabric. It was the big fire of 1990 and the new plan for the city. And you see the types of the buildings quite different from the previous typologies. The buildings constructed as a result of government initiatives reflect the new spirit of public administration and the need to accommodate the growing number of services and organizations then being established or reformed. The prefecture, the CONAC, we see here the previous building and the difference of scale between its environment of the new building. The prefecture, designed by the famous Italian architect Italiano Poselli. The Imperial Lycée, the Italier, by the same architect. The military headquarters, always by Poselli. And the arrangement of this area, always on the Ottoman archives. The new municipal hospital by Xenophon Peonidis, the only Greek architects of that period. And finally, the custom house, which is still there, designed by the professor of the Fine Arts School in Istanbul, Alexander Valori. The various ethnic and religious communities of the city, anxious to assert their own identities and compete with other communities, not just in Thessaloniki, but in the whole region of Macedonia, now began to seek generous financial support from their respective metropolises and proceeded to construct buildings to house their own institutions, tangible symbols of their presence intended to increase their influence in the city and its hinterland. It was not only churches these communities were interested to build, but also schools, hospitals, orphanages, and administrative buildings. The Orthodox metropolis of Thessaloniki, the Italian hospital, the French school, the Jewish school, and its plan by Elie Modiano, another engineer from Thessaloniki. It was so important, this building for the Jewish community, that you can see in a very densely built city how importance was given to the size of the courtyard of the school, for hygiene reasons, of course. It was bigger than any square of the city. Sorry. I tried to. I mixed up everything, but I want just to make the lamp to work. I can do it from here. Sorry. Here. No, we can put my full screen. I call the light. The light. Okay. So, this is the square, the yard of the Alliance Universelle Israelite school, and this is the Liberty Square. So you can see how important it was for the school hygiene to have bigger courtyards, bigger than the central square of Thessaloniki. Freed from the constraints of the old Ottoman building regulations, these new buildings sprang up all over the city, even outside the religious or cultural centers of its community. According to the second Ottoman census in 1906, the total population of the city was 115,000, of whom 47,000 were Jews, 34,000 were Greeks, and 30,000 Muslims, and some 4,000 belong to other ethnicities. I quote, "The only town which can be compared with Constantinople is Salonika," notes Sir Charles Elliot, Secretary of the British Embassy in Istanbul. Though it was never been the imperial residence, its long and eventful history, its polyglot and cosmopolitan population, and the strong European and non-Turkish influence to which it is continually subjected, are all points of resemblances of the great city. End of quote. During the same period, the newspaper Nea Alifia, Greek-speaking newspaper, in a lead article on March 1906, provides some measure of the impression caused by the new image of the city. I quote, "The visitor to Thessaloniki today, after an absence of only 10 years, cannot but admire the change, and only he can assess that has happened at its true worth. Indeed, beautiful new buildings are being erected atop the foundations of old ones. Lands long undeveloped are now filled with residences, shops, cafes, and gardens. The ancient zone of the city has been extended by 2,000 meters, and the countryside has been flooded by mansions. New streets are being built, existing ones are gradually being widened, urban planning laws are being strictly accepted." Let's see some buildings of this new era. The previous one was Ottoman Bank, this is the Salonika Bank, the new seafront, the splendid Palace Hotel, and here is the area which was burned in 1990 and redesigned, obeying the new laws of urban design with sideways, with trees, with material that was not easy to be burned, etc. The waterfront is being expanded, as I noticed, and before long, in combination with work on the port, will take the loveliest of impressions on visitors arriving by sea, with the most beautiful buildings along the quay. This is the seafront in the 1910. During the years 1885-1912, two new neighborhoods were being created outside the city walls of Thessaloniki. Chagir to the west and Hamidye, the official title of the Campania district, in the east. The city was undergoing a transformation, and with it, the life of people was changing. The main factor in the expansion westwards was the growth of industrial activities and the opening of the first factories, directly linked to the areas of the port and the railway stations. Again, the center. In Campania, the Hamidye district, on the other hand, the driving force was the need to develop a primarily residential district to meet new and higher standards, and the settlement along the length of the central boulevard of a newly emerging and soon-to-be dominant middle class. Pyrgi or Exoches were the names by which the regions outside the city's southeastern walls were more widely known. The decision to give the Sultan's name to the region was issued in October 1887, following the proposal by local authorities to create a separate district outside the Kalamarga Gate, due to the extent the region outside the southern walls had acquired. campaign first appears on a plan to expand the city beyond the southeastern walls, and bears the signature of Kambanakis, chief engineer to the city council, and the date of 1889. In 1885, when the first summary tax register, Ulasa, of the new district was drawn up, these were already quite a few houses. There were already quite a few houses, a number of towers, piri, kuleler, shops, fields, vineyards, gardens, and building lots in Hamidiye. The second two pages of this first book would increase in 123 in 1890 and to 2,000 to 230 in 1895. Houses increased in number and value, cultivated land decreased, and the conversion of land into building plots advanced rapidly. Wealthy capitalists, including Abdul Kerim, Ahmed Resim, Haji Mehmet Dervish, along with Charles Aslan and Adonis Sosilis, became the owners of large agricultural areas and proceeded to successive subdivisions, creating building lots which they resold at very high prices. The formation of real estate companies accelerated the patch of lot creation, and the rapid growth of the district is evident from the many sales and purchases noted in the Ottoman cadastre. For the final registry of the district, 172 tax sheets were required. The registry of residences on the Central Avenue alone encompassed 2 entire volumes. Through this cadastral registers, I found all the elements concerning the ownerships and the date of construction of these buildings. The fact is that during the first decade of the 20th century, Hamidiye experienced a literal building boom, in contrast with the traditional nucleus of the city, where the city comparable building activity was observed after the redesign only in the region destroyed by the fire of 1890. The reasons for which many residents of the city chose to set up permanent residence in the new district were quite specific and were directly related to the modernization of the city. The demolition of the southeastern walls in 1989 and the introduction of the transport link in the form of a horse-drawn tram in 1892 meant an end to the physical obstacles to expansion of the city. This is the mapping of the area 10 years after the foundation of this district. Here is the demolition of the southeastern walls and the creation of the new boulevard. The case of Hamidiye Avenue, Hamidiye District and Hamidiye Avenue, which was constructed following the demolition of the southeastern walls in 1889, was unique. Along the avenue, on estates belonging to the Sultan and at the expense of the Imperial Fund, buildings were created to be rented out to consulates and prominent city residents. These were the property of the Sultan and had been built between 1889 and 1890 solely for the purpose of exploitation, speculation by the Imperial Fund, in other words. And the new boulevard. On a street plan found in the library of the University of Constantinople, dated 11 August 1885, the mapping of the imperial lands between the White Tower and the Kalamarga Gate may be discerned. This is the Boulevard Hamidiye, and to the south, the extension to the east of the city. We found a special mention of the Sultan's buildings in an article with the general title Old and New Residence in Thessaloniki in the newspaper Allgemeine Bauzeitung in Vienna, published in 1889 by Alfred Messner. The article explicitly mentions that in order to provide a solution to the housing problem confronting both locals as well as the European residents of the city, due to Thessaloniki's exponential growth as a port city, the Sultan had proceeded in the expansion of the Imperial Fund to create a district in the northern part of the city. So, not only was the new boulevard designed in the days of the demolition of the Eastern Wall, but the Imperial Fund gave some types of buildings to be built on this boulevard. And by extension, this fund proposed some other types for the other parts of the district, of Hamidiye district, which was not exactly the same as we will see next. The Imperial Fund, in an effort to acquire new and profitable buildings, lots, undertook the embankment of the seafront from the White Tower as far as modern-day Paraskevopoulos Street. He turned these new lands into building plots and resold them to anyone with enough money to pay the steep prices of new lots. This is after the embankment, the plan before and after. This is the embankment. The plan for intervention to the region dates back to 1885, according to the map found in the library of the University of Constantinople. In April 1906, the City Council decided to extend the zone of the city 2 kilometers to the direction of the tram station, a consequence of the expansion of the exoches of Hamidiye district. In November 1906, approval of the decision by Constantinople was published, and orders were given to those who were responsible for the expansion of the zone of the city due to the noticeable increase of the population to make possible the erection of new buildings. The town plan for Hamidiye was completed in 1910. This is the plan. So you see that the Hamidiye district today is the same size of the city in the walls, the traditional nucleus. In an aerial photograph of 1939, this is of 1915, so we see the extension of the new district. But here in the aerial view of 1939, taken by the Hellenic Army Geographical Service, we note that the district continued to grow on the basis of the 1906 town plan, while the new plan appeared a fairly distant prospect. The society. The numerical data of Hamidiye is very limited, and only the Census of General Administration of Macedonia in 1913 provides data on the distribution of the various ethnic religious communities by district. And according to this, out of total of 25,000 people in Hamidiye, there were 12,600 Greeks, 49%, 6,000 Jews, 23%, 5,000 Muslims, 18%, 1,000 Bulgarians, 4%, and 1,500 foreigners, almost 4%. These numbers confirm the population composition of the district as a whole for the period 1885-1912, given that comparable percentages are mentioned in a document issued by the Vilayet the 13th of December 1994 and found in the Ottoman archives of the Prime Minister. In North Hamidiye, there were 170 Muslim families, 220 Greek families, 85 Jewish ones, and 8 Bulgarian families. That's why we call the whole Macedonia and Thessaloniki in European countries, Macedonia, the Saat, because of all this mixture of different communities. Even now, if you are in Italy, Macedonia means a big salad of everything inside. The rate of population increase was especially high if we compare the number of voters in the parliamentary elections of 1908 and 12, where we see that 3,000 voters in 1905 grew to 5,000 votes in four years. The rapid rate of population growth in the new district attests to the fact that Thessaloniki was becoming too large for its traditional use, and there are frequent references to the city's limited area in the relation to its population. In contrast to the pattern within the walls of the old city, in the new suburb, the residents were not settled in district, in discrete ethno-religious communities, mahale, the Millet system. The choice of address was based on criteria on a purely financial or social nature. Ottoman officials, foreign consuls, bank directors, senior and civil servants, industrialists, merchants, and foreigners were all numbered among the residents of the new suburb, since the decision to move out of the campaign was also a matter of social prestige. The status attached to a home in the new suburb was a major factor in the choice of residents. Some pictures of these families during this period, the coastal end of the new suburb. Here is the family of Rahmi Bey, who became later the administrator of İzmir, the Abbott family, the Butaris Hadzinazar family, publicity of what the European source of the city were offered to the new population, the Fernandez family, the Abbott family, a Greek family on the left, and the Jewish family to the right. And to the right is the family of Kouloussi Bey, the last mayor of Thessaloniki. And I had the chance to meet the boy to the right some 30 years ago when I was doing this research in Istanbul concerning this PhD thesis. It was only natural that many people should have sought a new home at Campani, Hamidie, where the conditions were favorable for the construction of new types of housing, better suited to a more European lifestyle, and with amenities which an old-style house in the city center could not offer. A healthy environment and the use of new construction materials and methods were seen as essential conditions when selecting a new home, while the social and financial status of the owner determined the size, the type of house, and the choice of course of the architectural style. Let's see a little bit the buildings of the public activities. The public activities established in Hamidie did not alter the character on the country. On the contrary, they made it more permanent and collective. These activities were created or established to meet the needs of a new district expansion of the public sector, founding of new schools and churches. New churches of the Hamidie district. There were also noted activities independent to the district's residential development, which owed their existence to more favorable conditions of installation. Factories, schools, let's see some factories, the Latini mill, and the Latini tile factory. To regions having strategic importance or regulated by legislation, as was the military installations, the founding of hospitals, the Jewish hospital, the Russian hospital, and of course to reinforcing the nature of recreation, which was the district's main attraction, the White Tower Recreation Complex. Particular zeal was shown in the building of schools where each community, through the curriculum and choice of the main language or of instruction, wished to demonstrate its attachment to some dogma or differentiate the education it offered its children from that provided by the schools of the Ottoman administration and the other communities. But their main concern, without exception, was to house these schools in newly constructed buildings which could meet the contemporary regulations concerning school hygiene. In the Heaven Hill district, one should mention the Maraslion Lycée by Grekos, the one we saw now, the Papathion Orphanage, built to plans by Pyramides, which was regarded as one of the finest and most important buildings of the city. And there were frequent references in the press at the time to its magnificent scale and opulence of its facades. There was a reportage by an English visitor who said, after he had visited this orphanage, I wish to see more orphans and less money. That means that it was very big, bigger than the Ottoman Konak. That's the kind of demonstration of power of the Greek community towards the central government. The late neoclassicism adopted in these buildings, it's another neoclassical building in the center of the town, the Archbishop's Brick, designed by famous Athenian architect Ernst Schiller. So the late neoclassicism adopted in the design of most of these buildings emphasized the shared ideological identity of the Greek communities and reinforcing the symbolic value of community buildings. By adopting patterns and models of contemporary Greek architecture in Athens, the University by Hansen, and the Encyclo by Kaftazoglou, these buildings offered the numerous Greek communities a link, on the one hand, to the national center, the cradle of neoclassicism, and on the other, a form of self-assertion and status in the multi-ethnic Thessaloniki. Now I make a small parenthesis to show similar buildings, school buildings, in other big cities of the Ottoman Empire, as well in Egypt, trying to demonstrate that the styles adopted by these communities were exactly influenced by the prototypes of the archetypes of Kaftazoglou and Hansen of the Athenian school architecture. So, first of all, here in Izmir, the Central Girls' School, designed by Karl Thanasopoulos. Thanasopoulos was a very famous Greek architect, but well known of his eclectic style, very close to neo-Baroque architecture. But here he was obliged to obey the community who wanted a temple like Parthenon, as it was referred in the papers of the epoch, and not the style, his personal style, which was shown in other buildings by him. For instance, this. The architecture of Thanasopoulos was buildings like this. The Acteon Palace Hotel in Fagino. The Evangelical School in Izmir, this building is still there. It's a picture, some 30 years ago. In Alexandria, the Eutrophian School for boys, the Eutrophian School for girls, the Benaikion Orphanage, the Zervudaikion High School. And even when they were obliged to make a competition for the architectural style, this is Alexandria, there were several entries, as you can see here, influenced by other, let's say, national architecture, as religious French architecture, for instance, or monastic elements of Western institutions. But finally, the prize went to the neoclassical building plan as the one here, which was constructed, the Familiaris School. End of the parenthesis. The other communities demonstrated no distinctive architectural preferences in the absence, for instance, of a Jewish or Armenian state and the influence of a national style. The building commissioned by these communities invariably followed the important models of society oriented to Western European influence, with the exception of their religious buildings, which did contain clear references to the community's own tradition. The Bet Saul Synagogue, the Catholic Church, the Armenian Church, the Bulgarian Church. The Yeni Jami, which was due to the initiative of the Donme community, Jews converted to Islam, constitutes a representative example of this movement. It combined the mosque type of the late Ottoman period, where it was graciously decorated with ornamental details related to contemporary synagogue architecture, as for instance the horseshoe arch, as a symbolic reminiscence of the Moorish architecture of their homeland, Spain, which they left in 1496. This is Yeni Jami. During its inauguration. And this is both influences from mosque architecture, the Yildiz Palace Mosque on the top, and the synagogue outside Paris. If you cut the half of this video to put together, you have the entrance of Yeni Jami. So the mixed identity of the owners is reflected to the adoption of this specific type of entrance. Residences. During a quick tour of today's Vassilios Georgiou and Vassilis Sorba streets, we may briefly distinguish the following main types of houses in this new district. Villas, where the entire building was used by a single family. Various two-story, two-family residences built by an owner and housing the owner and his family on one floor, with the other floor to be let or to house another family member, or apartment buildings where the entire building belonged to one owner who normally dwelt in one of the apartments and rented out the other apartment of the building. In Turkish, it's apartman haneler in that period. For instance, this building of Yakub Pasha, in Art Nouveau building, is the highest building of the Hamilton district. In these buildings, collective character appears in residences for the first time. In contrast to the traditional residential model of settlement by ethno-religious community, members of different communities share a common staircase and landing in these buildings. The modern apartment buildings in Spera and Galata transferred the modernization and cosmopolitanism of Constantinople to the large urban centers of the empire, but they refrained from the conservative arrangement of multi-story buildings in the capital of the Greek state, Athens, where a separate entrance and staircase correspond to each apartment flat. In Athens, a building of that period, it had 3 entrances on the ground floor, only private and staircases to each floor. The residence of Muslim families. Here we believe that we should emphasize the basic type of residence for Muslim families. In Thessaloniki, as in all the empire's large cities, the harem, in the sense of polygamy, merely existed, especially in the upper class. Nevertheless, the rule of thumb was to create a special place dedicated to the family and the social life of its female members, the harem league. In the mansions of Hamidiyeh, cases where an entire floor, including reception and service rooms, was used as a harem league are not unusual. the comparison of the ground plans of the first and second floor in Muslim mansions, in which the second floor is as luxurious as the first floor, leads to this conclusion. This is the Kapanji mansion, and we see the same luxury treatment of the plan in both levels. The Seyfullah Pasha mansion, again the same elaboration of the plan in the first and second floor. This does not happen with other Hamidiye mansions, where the architect and owner's attention was focused only on the first floor reception area. A chumba, a covered balcony, as a light intervention on the building's facade, and not as a functional part of its typology, replaces a balcony and indicates a place dedicated to women. This is another Muslim villa, quite well-known chalet type, just a chumba to cover the balcony. In cases where a Muslim purchased a European residence without a ceremony, he built one besides it or converted a room into a ceremony. This is smaller examples of these chumba cases. And now I come to Fakhri Tanman, the small boy we saw in the previous picture, whom I met 30 years ago, was an old man, and he wrote his memories of the family life in that house, bought by his father, we see here the Hulusi Bey. Fakhri Tanman, the son of Hulusi Bey, relates in his memoirs that his father, the city's mayor, bought the Villa Ida and converted one of the rooms on the ground floor into a ceramic. This is Villa Ida. I quote, "In the central hall of the house, there was a living room with richly decorated furniture which communicated with another reception room. Across from this room was my father's working space, office, which looked into the garden. To the left, the central area, there was a room where my mother met her close friends, a sort of living room. Next to it was the dining room with mahogany furniture and a small table with two chairs for the children. There was a space with cabinet closets in the dining room. This must have been this office service corridor. Food arrived there from the kitchen, which was in the underground. On the first floor, there was also a large room furnished in very good taste, where my mother sat with her guests. So is the third description we have of the separate social life rooms in a Muslim family house in Thessaloniki, in the Hamidiye district. We will finish this short presentation with the architectural style of residences. In contrast to typology, which comprises variation of one basic model, the morphology of the private dwelling presents a very broad stylistic range. All its variations appropriate to the same basic model, but at the same time serving to differentiate one building from another. View about the exterior appearance of the international movement of the late 19th century through its various morphological versions would provide owners and architects the opportunity to pick and choose, making residential architecture significant. A.G. Mann discerns Austro-Italian models, while Pierre Roussel speaks of simple or grandiose villas, all different, recalling everything from the Swiss chalet to the marble palace, from the English farmhouse to the Greek residence behind an elegant peristyle. According to the author, they all had a charm and shone their whiteness as they are half hidden behind blooming gardens like the pearls of the lovely jewel box. Imported local architecture styles found fertile ground in Thessaloniki and provided brilliant examples of the abilities of the designing architects, who, however, rather explicitly excluded the local architectural tradition of the city and their sources of inspiration. Besides, the question was that of differentiation from this architecture, regardless of how closely connected it was with the practices of residents of the local climate. Nevertheless, the architectural tradition continued to exist alongside the villas on the boulevard of Hamidiyeh and to ensure the continuity of architecture in the city as an option of the lower classes. We'll see this picture at the end of the presentation. The owners of the houses presented here belong to the most part to the city's three main communities. Ethnic religious identity did not dictate where people settled in the new district, but it did influence their preferences regarding the style of their homes. For each of them, architecture indicated, in addition to a rejection of tradition, their social and individual identity within the framework of a ruling class in which all were considered equals. Within the wider limits of the architectural eclecticism, different symbolic systems were obtained for the Greeks, Jews, and Muslims, and the Hamidiyeh. Triangular pediment of the houses of Greek owners and the overall treatment of their facade in accordance with the Neo-Renaissance model were reminiscent of morphological similar to those of the final phase of Athenian neoclassicism. The Muslim senior government employees and officials who settled in the new district would express a preference for the Orientalistic Ottoman Baroque with references to public Ottoman buildings. The building of Rahmi Bey, who was a deputy of Thessaloniki and then became the administrator of Izmir. His picture and his house, designed by the Italian architect Pietro Arrigoni. The choice for some Jewish owners who followed the neo-Baroque trend of eclecticism fell within the same morphological framework, though most would adopt several European architectural models, above all the chalet type of house. The Kapaji family villas, the Kapaji were Dolmen, Jews converted to Islam, and there was Arrigoni. They adopted this chalet type. Briefly, we could accept the inclination of the various communities to adopt architectural models from their metropolises or respective communities abroad. Athens, Constantinople, Austria, France, Italy. In addition to social and individual differentiation, the choice of the specific architectural style also demonstrated the degree of dependence on different national centers. It is obvious that in these cases, the architect would have to pay serious attention to the views of the client and the style of the house. Take, for example, the work of Peonides, a Greek architect, where in the villas he built in Thessaloniki, the neoclassical facade of Georgiades mansion were in stark contrast to the Turkish Baroque facade of Seyfullah Pasha mansion. Same architect, different clients. As regards the furnishing of residences, according to a French consulate report of 1892, simple furniture for everyday use was built in Thessaloniki or imported from abroad. In contrast, luxury furniture, which was available only in centers in the city's large department stores, was normally purchased by the owner in the course of one of his trips to France, Austria, or Italy. Newspapers, magazines, novels in Turkish began to describe European styles and ways to do things. Advertisements in the papers brought European objects as a concern of fashions closer to the once closed Ottoman Muslim house. We see here. Inside the house, the juxtaposition of old and new, Ottoman and European, and all pieces of the two were appearing. Western furniture formed only a fraction of the element of the interior decoration, alla franca, and coexisted with arrangements alla turca, chairs and small tables around divans. The coexistence of dining rooms with eating trays on the ground, while the entrance of the bed could designate a monofunctional space and turn into a bedroom. Some pictures of the interiors of these houses taken during official photos of governors. Here is a Saat, here is Venizelos. Some remainings of these houses today, and some old pictures of demolished house concerning the paintings of the cities. And this is the photos of the other neighborhoods, not along the main boulevard. So we can see the mixture of European and traditional styles together, a bigger density. And then sometimes coexistence of the new morphological trends, traditional typology with morphological elements from eclecticism. Typology doesn't copies morphology. The Havidiye district, after the integration of the city to the Greek state in 1912, I quote, towards the eastern part of the city, in the direction of Karaburun, beyond the White Tower, a beautiful new city is appearing, more European in character, with magnificent houses, broad boulevards, and extensive gardens. Adamandis Aromatiu, noted in 1915. The district of Campania, Havidiye, was regarded as a new city, and in fact, this characterization is justified by its size. It covered the same surface area of the traditional Lucas of Thessaloniki. It was the only area to have been based on a proper urban plan. After 1912, many of the villas of Havidiye district were abandoned by the Muslim owners, the essential population. After the 1917 fire, the building occurred at a rapid rhythm in the eastern suburb, since many residents sought new housing in the still sparsely inhabited area of Exarchia. We see copies in a smaller scale of the old mansions in the new neighborhood, in the new extensions after the fire. Massive reconstruction now began to become apparent and was also occurring in the eastern section of the city, especially in the older neighborhoods of Agedriana and Tanalepsi. You see the high buildings approaching the new neighborhood going from the center to the east. The contemporary city of Thessaloniki is being built as if nothing had preceded it. The contemporary city does not extend the old city, but abolishes it. Today, the image of this district is fragmentary. The main street no longer exists as a single unified space. Its facades no longer define a historic continuity in the urban landscape. On the main street, the villas are being torn down, listed as monuments, destroyed, or declassified. Some are abandoned, others restored, with altered uses and centerism. And this is the new waterfront of the district of Havidiye, which had put a technical and artificial distance between the house and the sea. Thank you very much. The lights were really very low. That's why I couldn't read very well. Sorry.
Teşekkür ederiz Vassilis Bey'e. Aslında herkesin bir tarihçi dostu olmasının ne kadar gerekli olduğunu öğrenmiş olduk. Teşekkürler. Bir ara verelim ve bir sonraki soruna geçmeden önce devam edelim ve çevirmenimiz için sanki yorgunluk oluyor.